They say, old women should mind their knees in prayers, but my truth? Old women see everything. I'm Mabel Jenkins, born in 1957 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Back in 2022, a week before signing my divorce papers, I walked in on my daughter-in-law in my husband's bed. I felt my throat close up, but then something happened. I stepped back and shut the door. Today, at 67 and sitting on my porch in Richmond, I'm finally sharing this, because I want someone to learn the power of pretending not to know. If you're listening, drop your city below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let me take you back to that day, quiet and sunny, just like the devil likes it. Charles and I had been married for 43 years. The last 10 were loveless, like sharing a house with a ghost that left the toilet seat up. We were set to finalize our divorce next week, civil, clean, no drama. Or so I thought. I'd been staying with my sister, but came back to the house that day because I forgot a pair of my mother's pearl earrings. I didn't call first. Why should I? I walked in with my own key, carrying a little grocery bag, and humming under my breath. That's when I heard it. A laugh. A woman's laugh, young, breathy, and way too comfortable for a stranger. My stomach tightened. I followed it upstairs, soft as cotton, thinking maybe Charles had moved on already. Maybe some sad woman from the church or one of those desperate divorcees he always played chess with at the rec center. But when I opened the bedroom door, Lord help me, I saw Keisha, my daughter-in-law, half covered in my floral sheets, giggling into my husband's chest like a child who just stole cookies and got away with it. My Charles, gray-bearded and shirtless, had his arm wrapped around her like he still had the strength to protect anything. They didn't hear me. That was the worst part. They were so deep in whatever sick delusion they'd built that they didn't hear my footstep, or the slight creak of the door. I froze in the hallway. The bag slipped a little in my hand, and the plastic crackled. Keisha perked up, like a dog sniffing the air. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe pride. Maybe strategy. But I stepped back slowly and let the door click shut. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked down those stairs, turned the kettle on like I came to make tea, and sat at the table like nothing had changed. 10 minutes later, Charles came down in his robe. Alone. Mabel, he said, startled. Didn't know you were dropping by. I forgot something, I replied, pouring my tea slow. Didn't mean to interrupt. His eyes flickered for just a second. If guilt had a sound, it was that silence that passed between us. Keisha didn't come down right away, probably fixing her face, or climbing out the window. When she did, she was in a long cardigan and looked flushed, like she'd jogged a mile. Mama Mabel. Hey! What a surprise, she sang out. My daughter-in-law had always been sweet-faced, but I'd never seen her look so twisted behind the eyes. I smiled. Hello, Keisha. Visiting my husband, are you? She blinked. Oh. I just came to drop off Derek's car keys. He left them here after the cookout last week. Charles didn't say a word. I reached into my purse and pulled out the pearl earrings. Found what I needed. I'll be heading out. I could feel both of them watching me as I walked out the door, my back straight, my face warm. I didn't look back. But baby, I was already planning. Because here's the thing about old women. When we get quiet, you'd better start praying. I went home to my sister's house and sat on her couch for 4 hours. No tears. Just thinking. Keisha was married to my only son, Derek. A good man, hard worker, didn't deserve to be embarrassed like that. And Charles? He was supposed to be a bitter memory by now, not the villain in a story I hadn't planned to write. But God gave me a front row seat for a reason. That night, I cooked dinner for my sister's grandkids like nothing had happened. But in the back of my mind, I was rereading every moment Keisha had smiled in my face, every compliment she'd paid me, every Sunday dinner where she brought dessert and kissed my cheek. Fake. Every bit of it. I didn't tell Derek, not yet. He adored his wife. Too much. If I told him without proof, he'd say I misheard, misread, maybe even lost my mind. No. I needed time. And evidence. So the next morning, I called Keisha. "Sweetheart," I said, "could you swing by Charles's house tomorrow? I left my Bible there and don't feel like driving across town." She agreed quickly. Too quickly. I smiled. "You're such a blessing, Keisha." I knew she'd go see him. I knew she'd take her time, thinking I trusted her. I didn't even warn Charles. Let them both think I was naive. And as they plotted, I started digging. I installed a small camera in the guest vent a year ago, forgotten, dusty, but still functional. The next day, I logged in remotely. And baby, what I saw made the first betrayal look like a handshake. They weren't just cheating. They were laughing. In my room. Talking about how slow I'd become. How I was probably too old to notice what's going on under her nose. I watched Charles say, "She'll be out of our lives next week anyway." Keisha smirked. "Let her sign those papers. Then we'll see who inherits what." I paused the video. Sat still for 10 minutes. Then I whispered to myself, "Not yet." Because revenge is best cooked slow with butter, not fire. And I was just preheating. I don't think people like Keisha and Charles realize that silence is a kind of hearing. I might not speak much, but my ears have always worked just fine. After watching that camera footage, I knew I needed more than evidence. I needed timing, and I needed patience. I didn't want to just expose them. I wanted the truth to burn slow, so every corner of their comfortable little world caught fire at the same time. So I stayed quiet. I showed up at family events, sat across from both of them, and smiled sweetly. I even let Keisha serve me a slice of sweet potato pie at our next Sunday dinner. "Extra cinnamon, just how you like it," she said with a grin that used to charm me. Now it just made me want to scrape my plate straight into the trash. But I ate it. Smiled. Told her, "You're just like a daughter to me." And I meant it. Like a daughter I wouldn't trust near a locked drawer. Meanwhile, Derek, my only son, was still blind. Still proud. Still bragging about his ride-or-die wife to anyone who'd listen. I watched him beam every time Keisha brushed his shoulder. It made my heart ache for the boy I raised to believe that love was loyalty. What he didn't know was that his own wife and his father were making a mockery of that in a bed I once called mine. I waited 3 weeks. 3 weeks of church services, phone calls, birthdays, and cookouts. 3 weeks of pretending that I didn't see how Keisha's eyes darted toward Charles when Derek wasn't looking. How Charles suddenly got busy every time I offered to drop something off. 3 weeks of quiet fury that no one else seemed to feel. Then came the morning I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I was in Charles's old study. He hadn't used it since we agreed to split, said it held too many memories. But I still had a few things there. As I dug through the drawers, looking for a file I needed for my attorney, I found a folded yellow notepad wedged behind a lamp. At first, I wasn't going to read it. But something in me said, "You already stepped into the fire. Might as well see what's fueling it." It was a letter. Not to me. Not even to Keisha. It was to Derek. A rough draft, like Charles had written it a few times and still couldn't get the words right. "Son, I know this might come as a shock. But sometimes love is messy. Sometimes two people find comfort in a place others might not understand. You'll hate me now, but I hope someday you'll see why I had to follow my heart. I felt my knees buckle, but I didn't fall. Instead, I took that letter. I folded it tight, and I put it back exactly where I found it. Because I wanted Charles to still believe he was in control of the story. I wanted him to think I was still just the soon-to-be ex-wife, who walked away with grace and a small slice of dignity. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything. I downloaded video clips from the hidden camera and put them on a thumb drive labeled Church Retreat Recipes. I started printing emails and phone records. I dug into Keisha's finances. She had a joint account with Derek. But little did she know he'd given me full access years ago, just in case something happened. What I found there made my hands go cold. She'd been pulling money weekly. Small amounts. Always cash withdrawals. And not for groceries, oh no. The dates and times lined up with days she visited Charles's place. She was slowly bleeding my son dry and planning a future with the man he called his father. That was when I knew what I had to do. I called Keisha on a Tuesday afternoon. Sweetheart, I want to throw a family dinner. Just one last gathering before the papers are signed, I said warmly. I want you and Derek to be there. Charles too. And your mama, if she's in town. Keisha didn't even hesitate. Oh, that sounds lovely, Mama Mabel, she chirped. Do you want me to bring dessert? I laughed. No, baby. I'll take care of everything. I hung up, and I smiled like a woman who'd just baked her best pie, only this time. The ingredients were lies, betrayal, and sweet, sweet irony. The next step? I met with Derek. I took him to lunch, just the two of us. I asked him how married life was treating him. He smiled, a little less brightly than usual. He looked tired. We're good, Ma, he said. She's been distant lately, but work's been stressful for both of us. I think she's just tired. I nodded. Maybe. But you know, sometimes people who look tired are just carrying secrets instead of stress. He looked at me. What do you mean? I paused. I wanted to tell him everything right then and there. But I couldn't. Not yet. Just pay attention at the dinner, I said, squeezing his hand. You might see something you didn't notice before. He nodded, unsure, but trusting. That was all I needed. The invitations went out by text. Family dinner. Sunday. 5 p.m. No excuses. Bring your appetite. I cooked all day. Not out of joy but control. Fried chicken, cornbread, macaroni, collard greens, sweet tea, and peach cobbler. The kind of spread that made people feel safe before you handed them a plate of truth. They all arrived one by one, like sheep walking into the wolf's den. Keisha came wearing a gold chain I'd never seen before, probably Charles's idea of romance. Charles brought a bottle of wine, like he hadn't burned his legacy to the ground. Derek showed up in his work clothes, tired again. Exhausted. Clueless. And me? I wore my late mother's brooch. The one she gave me the day I caught my first heartbreak. It was my armor. Dinner started sweet. Laughter. Jokes. Everyone passing plates and pretending the air wasn't charged. Then, just as the peach cobbler came out, I stood up. I want to say a few words, I said, holding up my glass. They all looked up, smiling. Even Keisha. Even Charles. And that's when I dropped the first piece of the match. To my husband, I said, staring straight at him. And my daughter-in-law. I hope the bed you share is more comfortable than the one you destroyed. The room went silent. Keisha froze. Derek looked confused. Charles turned pale. I looked at Derek. Sweetheart, I said, your father wrote you a letter. Would you like me to read it out loud? The moment I said those words, would you like me to read it out loud? You could feel the air in the room die. All the fake smiles collapsed like wet paper bags. Keisha's hand twitched. Charles leaned forward like he wanted to interrupt, but he didn't. And Derek, my poor Derek. His eyebrows furrowed, his mouth parted. Confused. Scared. That's when I knew this would hurt more than I expected. But I had to finish it. I reached into my purse, pulled out the folded note Charles had written his little confession he thought was safely hidden behind a lamp. I read it out loud. Word for word. Son, I know this might come as a shock, but sometimes love is messy. Sometimes two people find comfort. I had to follow my heart. By the end of it, Derek was no longer sitting. He stood, slowly, as if every part of him had turned to stone and couldn't move at once. His eyes stayed fixed on Charles, then darted to Keisha, who was trembling, lips parted like she wanted to explain, but what could she say? Derek asked, quietly, is this some kind of joke? Neither of them spoke. And that silence? That was the loudest confession of all. I kept my eyes on Charles. You said I'd be out of the way soon. That I'd sign the papers, disappear, and leave everything behind. But you forgot who taught you how to lie in the first place, Charles. He tried to speak, but I cut him off with a wave. No, this is my moment. I've been quiet too long. I turned to Keisha. I've watched you braid my granddaughter's hair, serve me pie, hold Derek's hand in public like you were the perfect wife, all while sneaking off to sleep with his father. You came into my house and dirted it. Her face was red now, wet with silent tears. I didn't mean. You meant every kiss, every visit, every lie I said, not raising my voice, but slicing every word clean through. You thought I was old, maybe senile, maybe too gentle to catch on. But I saw everything. And baby, I recorded it too. Derek's head snapped toward me. What do you mean, recorded it? I walked to the living room side table, pulled out a little black USB, and set it down in front of him like a dealer laying down an ace of spades. Everything. Video, audio, phone records, bank withdrawals. I've been collecting proof since the moment I walked in on them together in that bed. The one in my room. Derek looked like he wanted to vomit. He didn't pick up the USB. He just stared at it like it was on fire. Keisha finally spoke. Derek, listen. It wasn't what you think. It was confusing and emotional and... How long? He said, his voice cold, mechanical. Derek, please. How long? He shouted this time, slamming his palm on the table. I didn't speak. Neither did Charles. But Keisha? She broke. 8 months, she whispered. It started after our second fight about your job, and I didn't mean for it to happen, but it just... Derek put both hands on his head. Then he turned, walked out the front door without a word. Not a goodbye. Not a threat. Just the sound of his car tires screeching down the street. Keisha tried to follow, but I stopped her. I wouldn't, I said, calm and sharp. He's not ready to hear from you. And honestly, neither am I. Charles sat down slowly, shoulders hunched like a scolded boy. You've embarrassed me in front of my family, Mabel, he said quietly. I leaned forward. No. You embarrassed yourself. I just took off the mask. The dinner ended with no dessert. No goodbyes. Keisha left in tears. Charles slammed the door behind him. I sat in that quiet house, my peach cobbler untouched, and I exhaled for the first time in weeks. But I wasn't done. The next morning, I went to the bank. Turns out Charles never changed the will, never separated our assets fully. He thought I'd quietly fade into the background. What he didn't know was that I had reactivated everything with my lawyer the moment I saw that bedroom scene. By the end of the week, I had access to half his estate, including the Richmond rental property Keisha wanted to renovate with Derek. I revoked the grant permission she'd begged him to co-sign. And I had my lawyer freeze any joint accounts between Charles and Keisha, pending investigation of marital fraud. That part felt good, but not as good as what came next. I sent the video to Keisha's mother. Now, Miss Lenora was a God-fearing, no-nonsense woman from Atlanta who didn't play when it came to family values. I had always respected her. She'd once told me, "Keisha was raised with morals, Mabel. She just married young." Well, Miss Lenora called me back that evening. "I saw it," she said, voice tight. "And I just want to say, I am ashamed of what my daughter's done." "I appreciate that," I said honestly. She paused. "May I come visit? I need to talk to Derek. I need to apologize in person." I nodded. "Of course." Miss Lenora showed up 2 days later, hugged me like I was blood, and told Derek the truth face to face. "You didn't deserve this." And I raised my daughter better. It didn't fix things, but it helped. A little. That weekend, I visited the cemetery where my mother was buried. I sat beside her headstone, laid a single rose, and whispered, "Mama." I played dumb, but I outplayed them both. I let the wind rustle through my coat. I thought I'd feel empty after getting my revenge. But I didn't. I felt whole. For the first time in years. You see, pretending not to know gave me the power to watch, wait, and then strike without warning. Charles and Keisha thought I was nothing but a soon-to-be divorced old lady with no fight left in her. But I was patient. I was precise. And most of all, I was quiet. And that's why I won. The week after the dinner, word spread like wildfire, but no one really had the full story. Derek went quiet. He didn't answer calls, barely showed up to work. I checked on him from time to time, but I gave him space. A wound that deep. It needs air before it needs a bandage. Keisha tried calling me twice. Left voicemails, both fake sweet and pitiful. "Mama Mabel, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt anybody. I don't know how this all got so messed up." I deleted them. Charles didn't bother reaching out at all. Which was fine, because I had other plans for him. I'd spent decades covering for that man, letting him feel like he was the head of the family when I was the one holding everything together. His job hopping, his secret credit cards, his disappearing acts every couple years when things got hard. I let it go. I played peacekeeper for the sake of Derek and our image. But this? Sleeping with my daughter-in-law? Humiliating our son like that? That wasn't just a betrayal. That was deliberate annihilation of a family. So I wasn't going to just let it fade into gossip. No, baby, I was going to make sure every inch of this story stuck like hot gum on a church pew. See, Keisha and Charles weren't just cheaters. They were arrogant. Bold. They still believed they could manipulate their way out of it. Keisha went to Derek's office one afternoon pretending to accidentally drop off his dry cleaning only for him to escort her right back to the elevator. Told her, in front of the receptionist, "You don't bring poison into my life anymore. We're done." And Charles? He started calling mutual friends. Telling folks I snapped, after the divorce, that I was turning everyone against him. Said I faked the footage. Said Keisha was seduced, not the other way around. So I decided to clear things up. Publicly. There was a local charity gala coming up, a banquet for retired educators. I'd been invited months ago, and guess who else was listed on the guest list? Charles and Keisha as sponsors. They thought I wouldn't show. They thought I'd be too embarrassed, too ashamed to be in the same room. They were wrong. I showed up in a navy blue satin dress, heels that hurt like sin, and my hair done up the way Charles used to like it back when he still remembered how to respect a woman. Derek escorted me, clean-shaven, well-dressed, and silent. That was his choice. His strength was in his stillness, just like mine had been. The ballroom was beautiful crystal chandeliers, jazz band, white tablecloths, all that. I walked in and saw them both. Charles, in a gray suit that didn't fit quite right anymore, and Keisha, in a tight red dress, eyes scanning the room like a hawk looking for scraps. She saw me first. Her jaw tightened. Charles turned slowly and gave a polite nod like I was an old neighbor, not the woman he left bruised and betrayed. I nodded back. The evening carried on. Dinner was served. Wine was poured. Speeches were made. And then came the moment. They invited me up to say a few words about my late mentor, Miss Geraldine Parker, the woman who taught me to teach with compassion and courage. But I had a different lesson that night. I stood behind that podium, took the microphone, and said, "Tonight I was asked to speak on mentorship. So let me tell y'all a little story." The room went still. There was a woman who gave her life to building a family, who raised a son, kept her husband fed, clothed, and loved, who opened her doors every Sunday and made room for a daughter-in-law who she treated like her own blood. And in return, that woman had to sit in her own living room and watch the people she trusted betray her. People were turning in their chairs now. Some glanced at Charles and Keisha. Others whispered. She stayed silent, I continued, because she knew revenge is like a pot of greens best when simmered slow. I paused, looked dead at Keisha. I stayed silent long enough to collect video, bank records, even letters meant for my son. And now, I stand here free. Not just legally. Spiritually. Because they might have broken vows, but they couldn't break me. Charles stood up halfway. "Mabel, this isn't the place." "Oh, but you chose this place," I said, turning toward him. "You signed your name as a sponsor. You brought your new guest here on my family's good name. So now, you get to watch that name reclaim itself." Keisha grabbed his arm. "Charles, sit down," she whispered, but everyone heard it. I held the mic close. "To anyone here wondering, yes, the rumors are true. My husband and daughter-in-law betrayed me and my son. But more importantly, we survived it. And we are stronger for it." I looked around. This speech was meant to honor a mentor who told me, "A woman who keeps quiet in the face of disrespect teaches others how to treat her." So tonight I speak, loud and proud. The applause started slow. One hand clap. Then two. Then the whole room. Some people were clapping because they respected me. Others because they were relieved someone finally said what they'd been whispering for weeks. A few clapped because they just loved drama. I didn't care why. I stepped down from that stage with my head held high. Keisha didn't even finish her dessert. Charles left his seat half full and slipped out during the next speech. And me? I stayed until the last napkin was folded. People came up to me after. Some offered hugs. Some whispered, "You're brave." But one older woman, with silver hair and a cane, leaned in and said, "Baby, you didn't just serve the truth, you made them choke on it." I smiled, because that's what I came to do. Forgiveness is a funny thing. People think it means forgetting, that you wipe the slate clean and pretend none of it ever happened. But real forgiveness? That's when you remember every detail, and still choose to walk away holding your peace while they carry their shame. After the gala, everything changed. Charles disappeared for a few weeks. Not literally, he still lived in the city, but suddenly, the man who loved being the center of attention couldn't show his face without someone whispering behind his back. I heard from a friend at the lodge that he'd resigned his position as club treasurer. Embarrassment has a way of shrinking even the proudest man. As for Keisha, well, she packed up her things and left Derek's house within a week. Her mother came back down from Atlanta to help, tight-lipped and angry the whole time. I don't know what was said behind closed doors, but I imagine it wasn't gentle. She didn't even try to reach out to me again. The silence was a gift. Derek? My boy stayed quiet, but steady. He moved back in with me for a while, not because he needed to, but because, in his words, I need to hear your voice more than the walls of that house. We sat in the evenings and watched the news or old movies. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. He cried once. Only once. It was late, and I'd just handed him a warm plate of pot roast. He looked down, then up at me, eyes wet. I loved her, Ma. I really did. I know you did, I said, brushing his shoulder. And that's why she'll never be able to say she lost to anything less than real. A few months later, he filed for divorce. Clean. Quick. She didn't even contest it. Probably too ashamed to fight. But I wasn't done yet. You see, I could have let things go quietly. I had exposed them. I had freed my son. I had held my dignity like a crown. But they still thought I was soft. That I'd pull back at the last second, or quietly bow out of the financial aftermath. So I didn't. I worked with my attorney to revise the divorce terms with Charles. I took the house my name had been on the deed since day one, and I made sure it stayed that way. I also claimed 60% of the remaining joint assets due to emotional damages and long-term betrayal, backed by our lawyer and the private investigator I'd hired quietly back in month 2. Yes, I hired a PI. Not because I needed more evidence, but because I wanted confirmation. That little gut voice? It deserves backup. Turns out Charles had been cheating long before Keisha. There was a Donna in 2006. A Marcia in 2013. Nothing long-term. Just pit stops. And I forgave him each time, mostly because I convinced myself I didn't want to die alone. But I realized, I'd rather be alone than be a fool. So I kept the house, the car, and even the little lake cabin his family always assumed would pass to him. And Charles? He moved into a one-bedroom condo in Midlothian, right behind a gas station. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't ruin him. I simply made sure he lived the rest of his days with only what he deserved. Nothing more. I even sent Keisha a box. Inside was the gold chain she used to wear, the one Charles bought her. I placed it on top of a printed copy of the bank statements showing every transaction she made behind Derek's back. Tucked underneath was a handwritten note. This isn't about hate. It's about reminders. Wear your truth as proudly as you wore this necklace. She never replied. But I know she got it. I paid for signature confirmation. Now here I am, sitting on this porch in Richmond, sipping iced tea, watching the world go by. I garden in the mornings. I bake on Saturdays. I read every day before the sun sets. And best of all, I laugh again. Not that half-hearted chuckle women force to keep the peace, but a deep, rich, belly laugh that comes from being free. People in town still stop me in the grocery store. Mabel, they say, you really did that, didn't you? I just smile. Yes, baby. I did. Because I'm not just someone's ex-wife. I'm not just a mother or grandmother. I'm a woman who knew when to wait, when to listen, and when to strike. And even now, I carry no hate. I pray for Keisha sometimes. Not for reconciliation, but for growth. I hope she learns to love without deception. To be whole on her own, so she never feels the need to steal someone else's comfort again. I pray for Charles too. He built his grave with secrets. I just handed him the shovel. And as for Derek, he's thriving. He just bought a townhouse not far from here. No dating yet, but he laughs again. His laugh, my God, it sounds like music now. And when I look at him, I see not just a son, but a man who walked through betrayal and still found his feet. So, what's the lesson here? Pretending not to know doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're watching, calculating, choosing your moment. Let them think you're naive. Let them talk behind your back. Then, when the time is right, make them wish you'd stayed quiet forever. To anyone listening, if someone's betrayed you, don't rush your reaction. Sit still. Breathe. Watch. And when you move, do it with grace, power, and precision. Like an old woman with nothing to lose and everything to gain. Sometimes the greatest revenge is quiet dignity paired with unstoppable wisdom. Patience isn't weakness, it's preparation for justice wrapped in peace. Drop your thoughts below, hit like if this gave you chills, and don't forget to subscribe for more grandma timeless tales that remind us all. Never underestimate the woman who raised everybody.